How are you doing? I have to say it is such a welcome sight to see so many people come on out, especially on a chilly day, for this. This is important. And what we're talking about today, we're not talking about politics. We're talking about defending our democracy. We're talking about taking a moment out of our lives to reflect back on one of the darkest days of our democracy. And I think about it a lot. There's not a day that goes by when I'm at the Capitol where I don't, at some point, think about the windows that were shattered. Thinking about the doors that were broken down. Thinking about the police officers that were attacked and assaulted. Thinking about just how close things got that day. And reminding ourselves how fragile our democracy is. I remember showing up to work that day. We had no idea what was going to happen. We had got some warnings. We weren't really sure. I saw a few MAGA flags as I was driving into work. But nothing prepared us for what was going to happen. I remember I was actually making my way to the Capitol when we got the alert to shelter in place. You know, I remember I worked in Afghanistan, I spent time in Iraq, but I never ever imagined that at the United States Capitol we would have to take cover. That colleagues of mine would be rushed out of the House chamber, that guns would be drawn. You saw the pictures, guns drawn on the House chamber. It just still shocks my mind to see those images, to recognize that we live in a time when things that we thought were impossible, in fact, happen. I remember after the riot was quelled, I came back into the House chamber. We gathered again. We listened to leaders on both sides of the aisles talking about how this was the darkest day of their time. In fact, one of them being Kevin McCarthy, saying it was the darkest and hardest day of his time in Congress. He seemed to have forgotten that he said that at some point. And I thought maybe if ever anything came out of such a tough and horrible day, it would be unity. Maybe this would be the thing that breaks the fever of this country. Maybe this would be that defibrillator that would finally get our country back into a stable rhythm. That was what I hoped. But within just a few minutes of us getting back to that chamber, I saw colleagues of mine literally pulling out the same speech that they were going to give, talking about how the election was stolen. As if nothing happened on that day. And then just person after person just continuing to say that the election was stolen. That is when it just hit me. That as bad as things were, as tough as things were, that wasn't going to change it. So I left the House chamber out of disgust and frustration. I walked into the rotunda, which I believe to be the most beautiful room and the most beautiful building in this country. And I saw just the trash and the debris, the brokenness of that beautiful room. And as many of you know, I decided to just stop and try to pick up the pieces. And I cleaned up the Capitol, and for the days after that incident, I had a lot of people come to me and they talked about what that photo meant to them, and they used this phrase. They kept talking about. They talked about this Mr. Rogers phrase, saying, "Look for the helpers." Right? That in these times of crisis, Mr. Rogers urging our kids, saying, "Look for the helpers. That there always will be helpers." And I took that to heart. I was a Mr. Rogers kid. I grew up watching the show. And a few days after January 6th, I went home and saw my kids for the first time. And my kids, I remember my oldest. He was then, I guess, about 5, 6 years old. And, I immediately drove to his daycare, and I picked him up. And he came up to me, gave me a big hug, and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." He said, "Did something bad happen at work?" I turned to my wife because neither of us had talked to them at that point. But it was interesting to hear that he still knew, that still something seeped in. So that night I talked to him. I talked to him about what had happened. I used that phrase. I said, look for the helpers. I talked about the Capitol Police who bravely defended our democracy, kept me and others safe, and unfortunately some lost their lives. I talked about Officer Eugene Goodman, who was famously there showing how he stands up against that crowd. I talked about the National Guard coming from all parts of the country to defend our capital and our democracy. I said, look for the helpers. And I tried to reassure them that I would be okay. But as the weeks went on and the months went on, I'll be honest, I started to think, you know what? It's not just about look for the helpers. It's also about trying to understand, how did we get to this place right now where so many people in our country don't want to help, in fact they want to do harm? How have we come to this place where we saw Americans fighting other Americans in the United States Capitol? And what does it mean for us right now in this moment? That's why I'm here today. And I'm sure that's why you are here today. Because you know the challenges that we face wasn't just on that one dark day, that they continue. That we continue to face a deep and disturbing problem in this nation, where we are just moving crisis to crisis. And not only that, we have people that I work with, people in leadership in this country that are trying to do something that would make our country weaker, something that would do irrevocable harm to our democracy. So with the same kind of commitment that we felt after those dark days, I ask you to think about it going forward. That it's not just about look for the helpers. It's for you to think about how you can step up to be a helper. About each and every one of us doing our part. Not just assuming that someone else will fight our fights for us. Not just saying we're terrified about what happened that day, but we sure hope someone fixes this. This country will not fix itself unless people stand up and say, I am going to do my part to fix it. So that is what I charge each and every one of you to think about. Today, you have done the right thing. You have shown up for your democracy, for your country. You decided to say, I am going to say something. I am going to be here and show what I care about. But what I ask of you is, what are you going to do tomorrow? What are you going to do next week? What are you going to do next month? What are you going to do next year? This isn't the time when you only think about this only on the anniversary of January 6th. You think about this every day, and you think about how you are going to do something about it. And know and feel right now that you are not alone. I draw my energy from you. You draw your energy from each other, that we recognize that we're part of something bigger than all of us. And that is worth fighting for. I am going to do everything I humanly can to be able to heal this democracy, make sure we never have those types of challenges that we saw on January 6th, and fix this. But I can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. So let's make sure that we come out of today stronger than ever. Show what it means to be able to stand up as citizens, as Americans, and be able to say, those people who raided the Capitol, they don't speak for us. That's not the America we're fighting for. And we're going to come out victorious in the end, because we know that we are standing on the right side, and we are going to do everything we can to protect this nation we love. Thank you.